I appreciate having the opportunity to share my experience of teaching on Victoria Island last winter. It's going to be different. This is what my yoga teacher tells us when we get used to the routine. She's training us to stop being attached to our expectations. So I'm taking you to world's 9th largest island, Victoria Island. On the south side of it lies a community called Cambridge Bay that in Inuinnaqtun, which is the language of the area, is referred to as Iqaluktutiaq, a place of many fish. The Inuit used to gather here before a community was created, and obviously fish. Settlement was really created only in the 50s when the dew line was built. 200 Inuit men, I imagine, were hired to build a building for the dew line, distant early warning line that was used during the Cold War. Nowadays, Cambridge Bay has 1,500 people, and it is a location of the government of the Kitikmeot region. It's administratively the Western Nunavut region, one of 3. Cambridge Bay has 2 modern schools, elementary and high school, as well as Arctic College, that is starting to produce its first teaching graduates. It is powered purely by fossil fuels. I guess diesel or gas are sources of all the electricity, heating for the buildings, fuel for surprisingly many trucks, and the snowmobiles and snow removal machines. So I found Cambridge Bay actually quite noisy. It took me about half an hour of walking to get away from the... Just like in the South, it is strange that you see people driving to work even though it takes 5 minutes to walk. Since the days of dog sleds are long gone, at least in Cambridge Bay, this is how people exercise. The town is connected with Yellowknife with 2 jet flights every day and some smaller flights. You have a pretty good internet connection, even though it's variable and unpredictable in its speed. So spending winter in Cambridge Bay meant dealing with 4 months of temperatures of around minus 50 degrees. And me being an outdoorsy person, I wanted to be outside. So I made adjustments to my clothing. I sewed a hood with fur, and I made fur mitts. The warmest mitts I brought from the south felt like eggshells on my hand. It didn't give any protection whatsoever. I tried cross-country skiing, since that's what I am used to from the south. And every time I tried, it was really frustrating, and I thought maybe something happened to me. But really, the temperature of minus 30 affects the, I guess, gliding. You can't glide. Then it was not being able to see sideways in the hood affects your sense of balance. And what else? Oh yeah, the flat light. Most of the time there seemed to be flat light during the winter, and of course you cannot see the bumps on the snow. And also the snow is very hard packed, so it kind of feels like skiing on cement. So in the end, my skis saved me, and they delaminated, so I was left to walk with dogs. So then there was the darkness. There is 6 weeks when the sun doesn't come up above the horizon, and you get still this bit of twilight, so 2 or 3 hours you can go and walk around. The darkness really affected me, and even though I brought the bright sad lamp and lots of vitamin D, I really had trouble with it, so I'm going to illustrate the effects of it reading from my journal. White men who know better established a 9-to-5 work regime up here. Yes, we love conquering nature. Haven't we learned anything since the days of Franklin? Haven't we created enough disasters to see that southern ways don't work up here? I guess we don't know any better. Sleeping through winter darkness would be considered inefficient and unprofitable. So in my teaching world, this means that I drag myself out of bed at 8 a.m. I stay there as long as I can. It is pitch black outside. I boil some water for coffee and get dressed. The water and clothes are ready from the previous evening. Sorry, lost my place. The water and clothes are ready for the previous evening to avoid unnecessary moves and decisions, both equally unwelcomed. In a few minutes, I'm on my way and crunch slowly to school. I hardly settle into the calming, repetitive movement of shuffling my feet as I get into our staff room and start to undress. I resent my parka as it pulls my hat off my head. I resent the person who filled the coffee pot full while I need only to boil a cup of water for my porridge. I swear silently on my way to classroom while spilling what's in my cup on a new carpet. I unlock the classroom door at exactly 8:45 a.m. when the bell goes. I free my hands from holding cups and bags, sigh a sigh of relief, and hope that nobody will speak to me for at least another hour. So this is how we welcomed the sun in about mid-January when it came up above the horizon, by enticing it to come back quickly by food, an old Inuit custom, according to our principal, who was Inuit. And the light did come back very quickly, about 20 minutes every day. The state of my mind didn't follow suit. So here I will step back and I explain why I went. I had a dream since I was a kid, basically, in the communist Czechoslovakia, of living with native people, on the land, off the land, in a small group, kind of like a 12-month-long canoe trip. I got it from reading Karel May novels. Those of you from Eastern Europe might know him. He wrote about First Nations in Western states, but as an adult I learned that his version of their life was romanticized. So I immigrated to Canada in 1990 and explored the beautiful land extensively by canoe. And then going to teach to Nunavut seemed like a long-awaited logical step in finding my tribe. I had fair warnings before I left that finding a healthy, sustainable community in the North was delusional in the age of globalized corporate greed. In 2011, when I started applying for jobs, there was a long article in the Globe and Mail that talked about suicide, the very high suicide and crime rates in Nunavut. And also there was a native play in Toronto that was done by Toronto actors with actors from Yellowknife, and it showed a dark day in Igloolik during the winter, and it was really dark in every sense of the word. It showed abuse of parents, abuse of children by their parents, high school students using drugs and alcohol, as well as teen suicide. But I guess my mind was set, and I got a job in Cambridge Bay. Also, I think I needed to get away from the Toronto culture of convenience and consumerism. So I did find aspects of culture that I dreamt about, such as this. The Inuit still go on the land and get some of their food off the land. They hunt for caribou and muskox. They get together, the whole community gets together for feasts. They share frozen caribou meat, frozen char, and other things. They get together for games. They love to laugh. There were 2 week-long periods of games while I was there. So they play these really silly games or cooperative games for different ages, or the traditional athletic games. You can see a muskox fight at the top, and at the bottom here it was called an airplane, but this one is having like a crash landing. They certainly respect children. They welcome bringing children to the world. They have very many of them. They love to get out on the land and fish. They fish for char on the lakes and for cod or seal on the sea. Some of them, though mostly only the elders that I have experienced, still remember and respect the old traditional ways, including the language. The language, as I said, is called Inuinnaqtun in the western region. Oops, forgot to click the circle. Yep. The magic blue circle that will take me to the second part. It will take me to school. A lot of my focus was paid to school. That was a job I was hired to do or committed to do. And before I started teaching at Kilining High School, I often thought about what am I going to teach to whom and why. So from the picture you can see the students were a mix of children who had parents who came from the south and Inuit children. A number of my students were from mixed relationships. I was to teach all the subjects in grade 9, which is kind of like the middle school down here. And it became a hard question when I asked myself, what should I teach in the subjects? Nunavut has been creating a new curriculum since the territory was created, which is quite a few years ago now. But they are using either Alberta or Northwest Territories curriculum, which is very similar to Ontario. And I was supposed to teach the Nunavut values or principles, which you can see on the screen. That's really a healthy value system. But it was hard to think how I would incorporate actually Inuit activities for the reason that I wasn't familiar with them, or just simply time-wise. The Alberta curriculum is so packed that it's hard to add anything on top of it. So I had to face the question, what makes sense to teach to a class that is mixed from hunters and university-bound students? I had a sense of what to teach to the university-bound students from my work down south here. It was hard to think about what the lives of the Inuit children are going to be, or the hunters are going to be in 5-10 years when the Northwest Passage is open to commercial ships. I think it's pretty apparent that the cash economy is firmly established up there. You can't really buy a snowmobile against caribou, though I discussed that idea with my students, and we were trying to figure out how many caribou would it take to barter for cash to get a snowmobile. But one of my boys, he started participating in this discussion, but he had no idea how much a snowmobile would cost. And in the end, he said, well, his father's snowmobile is going to be good for the rest of his life anyway, so it didn't seem like a discussion worth having for him. There was a real variety of abilities in my classes. The young man on the right could spell any word in the dictionary. The student who wrote the note to Santa on the left is very aware of modern technology, or the toys rather, but he's writing at about a grade 3 level. So for me to efficiently teach this class, I would need to prepare like 4 lesson plans, which was humanly not possible. But it never really came down to that because student behavior kind of rescued me from that task. So if you want to teach a class, you need about 70-80% of students who can work with your program, like a core group. In the grade 9, it was 70 and 80% who had trouble focusing, even for a short period of time, sitting still. They had angry fits, like throwing chairs, occasionally slamming doors. So the ratio was exactly opposite to what it needs to be. Sometimes students slept, and that was actually a relief. So from there were obviously reasons why the behavior was such an issue, and I searched, because in order to work with these students, I needed to find out who they are and what's happening with them. From my colleagues, I learned that parent care really varies in the homes. In some homes, drug and alcohol are an issue, so also the homes are noisy. So the kids really come to school to sleep because it's a quieter place. Some of them go to work hungry because their parents spend money on payday Fridays on the alcohol, and then there's not enough money left for food. From the report, or from a report I found on a website that was prepared by the ministry or the education authority of Nunavut, I learned that parents also don't trust the new school system because of their experience with residential schools. Pretty early on, I got to participate with my students in a workshop about drug awareness. The instructor, Jerry Gerchinsky, was flown from the south, just like all health professionals are. And he talked to me and my colleague during the break and really filled in the gaps about what's happening with the students. He talked about the pain they're sharing with us in the classroom, and that the pain came from their parents. Most of the parents would have been sent to residential schools, and also they did not experience proper parenting, therefore they cannot pass it on to their children. From stories I heard shared by other Inuit colleagues and community members, this was a very plausible explanation, or the other stories really agreed with what Jerry said. So that helped me to understand what I should be doing in the classroom, which meant a lot less of teaching and a lot more of healing, though that wasn't what I was trained to do. But I had to do my best because there wasn't anybody else to do that job. So my university students, or university-bound students rather, they got units of study and they essentially learn on their own, and I dealt the best way I could with the ones expressing pain loudly. We did as much gym as possible physical movement. I try to sit with them in a circle, talk about how we feel and emotions and how we can make our lives better and so on. It sometimes worked, sometimes didn't. Art sometimes worked. This young man rarely could sit still. Surprisingly, sewing mitts worked nicely for some of the boys who were struggling. Some of the kids came outside and had fun fishing, just having fun in the snow. Obviously, a sense of safety was quite different up there than down south here. I would never be able to do this on a field trip. Other people obviously figured out that healing needs to be done, so these charismatic police officer came from Vancouver, Lower East Side, and taught drug awareness. They also taught the kids yoga and karate. What are they doing? Judo. Judo in this. And they promoted healthy nutrition and yoga. But yoga was really hard for the kids because they had to be quiet, and that didn't seem to work for them. It took me a really long time to develop trust, but I did with a number of the students. This was a success story. This young woman was asking me to wake her up, call her in the morning to finish her junk art project. This is what she was working on, exploring the changing relationship of the Inuit to the land. While originally only organic things went on the land, now a variety of materials are put on the land. In Cambridge Bay, things are taken to the dump and burnt. So you can see some amazing wildlife, especially birds in the spring, on the dump. And then, because there is food, and then strangely, when you go on the tundra, you see like rolling plastic bags, really bizarre, thinking that you are so close to the North Pole, which is supposed to be pristine, but it isn't. So this is how close the dump is to the town, and it really bothered me to see first the burning, and then also the fact that they use styrofoam at the feast. So at the final barbecue for parents and students, I volunteered to serve the hot dogs, and I got ready plates. We had real plates. But the Inuit ladies that prepared the hot dogs from Inuit Association, they insisted, because it was convenient to use styrofoam plates. I offered to wash. I didn't give up. Then I talked to them about the fact that, you can get sick, you can get cancer when you breathe in these nasty chemicals. That did not make any difference. So they took away the real plates. They used the styrofoam, and I had a good crying fit in the staff room. So I didn't find my tribe. In the winter darkness, I connected to a really dark place in my soul, and the long days of light didn't bring me out of it. It was really hard to see the pain of the Inuit children day after day. It eventually connected me to the pain of my own childhood. I didn't grow up with my parents until the age of 6. And obviously it must have been some sort of pain in my parents' life that caused all this to happen, as well as the political oppression of communism, and perhaps the 2 world wars that happened in Europe preceding to that. With all that time to think and feel as you have up north, it was as if I looked myself in the mirror, and I got to question our place in the Anthropocene biodiversity that Mart was talking about in the beginning. It is incomprehensible to me that I can belong to a conscious species that bases its survival on hierarchy and military power and ruthless exploitation of life, to the point that it endangers its own existence. Light comes out of darkness. There are many false lights out there, and we have to do our best not to get into these drugs and alcohol, or painkillers, tech toys, and focus on stuff or only excuses. To give up responsibility for the consequences of our existence. True light, I believe, can only appear if we embrace darkness, if we embrace the anger, the pain, the sadness, and if we let them transcend our way of being into something else. So I think our children in Nunavut, our Inuit children, as well as us here, we need to connect to how we truly feel and find words to express it. And I appreciate having had the opportunity to share my own feelings with you here today. I will close with words of Rumi. We are the mirror as well as the face in it. We are tasting the taste this minute of eternity, where the pain and what cures the pain, both. We are the sweet, cold water and the jar that pours. Thank you.